Great. Well, welcome everyone. We are thrilled to have you joining us today for our webinar on Catholics in Solidarity with Seafarers on this Day of the Seafarer. Thank you so much for making the time to learn more about these very important essential workers and what more you can do to stand in solidarity with them. We would like to begin our program today with an opening prayer. And I am happy to introduce Sister Joanna Akeri. She is the National Director of Stella Maris and the Assistant Director of Cultural Diversity in the Church for the USCCB. Sister Joanna.
The fruits of your womb. For without your son, we are lost. Pray that we will never fail in life's journey, that in heart and mind, in word and deed, in days of turmoil and in days of calm, we will always look to Christ and say, "Who is this that even wind and sea obey him?" Our Lady, Star of the Sea, pray for us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sister Joanna. And I'd like to invite you to share a few words with us today about your ministry with Stella Maris.
My friends, as you know, people ask, who are Stella Maris? Stella Maris is the international ministry of the Catholic Church to care for the spiritual well-being and the social needs of seafarers, their families, port personnel, and all those who travel and walk at sea. In every major country, a bishop serves as the Stella Maris Episcopal promoter, overseeing the work of the national director. As the national director, my responsibility is to coordinate the individual chaplains' effort and to assist them in developing their ministries. The mission of Stella Maris is to reach out to seafarers, fishers, their families, and all who travel and walk on the seas, as well as the port personnel. Seafarers are often away from their home parishes, and some seafarers have no parish setting to help them maintain ties with their faith and family. A network of Stella Maris ports, offices, and Catholic chaplains establish a parish that accommodates the seafarers' unique lifestyle and needs. In our country, United States, we have 53 ports, which is spread out across 48 dioceses. We have over 100 chaplains, pastoral teams, including priests, religious deacons, and lay ecclesia ministers. However, this is not enough considering the nature of the work involved. Around the world, Stella Maris assists seafarers to meet their basic needs: a genuine welcome, spiritual renewal, a safe haven while in port, a safe work environment, a just contract, communication with loved ones back home, and few hours of recreation while they are in port. Permit me to say a few more. Stella Maris relies on the help of people like you. Here is what you can do to participate in its mission. Spread the word and acquaint yourselves with Stella Maris' work. If you have a friend in a port city, or if you live in a port city that has neither a Catholic maritime center or any Catholic program for seafarers, discuss with your parish or other Catholics the possibility of beginning and sustaining the ministry. Volunteer your services at the local Seafarers centers. If you are a Seafarer, take up the task of Stella Maris ministry. The chaplain cannot do the work alone. Ask the Stella Maris chaplain or any priest how you may become a Eucharistic minister or a prayer leader to enhance the spiritual life aboard ship. Make a donation to your local Stella Maris Maritime Center or the Stella Maris National Office at the USCCB. Finally, my friends, Pope Francis said, be the voice of those workers who live far from their loved ones and face challenges and difficult situations. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you again for organizing this gathering in honor of the Seafarers.
Thank you so much, Sister Joanna, and thank you for the wonderful work and ministry of Stella Maris. It is my pleasure now to introduce you all to our wonderful panel of speakers today. I am Jennifer Reyes-Lay. I am the Executive Director of U.S. Catholic Sisters Against Human Trafficking, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. Our first speaker today will be Father Sinclair Ube. Father Sinclair is the pastor of St. Francis of Assisi in Orange, Texas. He's a diocesan director for Stella Maris of the Diocese of Beaumont, executive director and port chaplain of the Port Arthur International Seafarers Center, a U.S. merchant mariner. So Father Sinclair, will you say just a few words about yourself and your connection to the maritime world to introduce to our attendees today? Oh, and you're still on mute.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. Nope, you're back on mute again.
Okay, how's that?
Perfect.
All right. So I'm Father Sinclair Ube. I grew up in the city of Port Arthur, Texas, famous for one son and one daughter, and that is Janis Joplin and football coach Jimmy Johnson. Manifesting gifts and talents that I don't have either one of those. But it also is a seafaring town. And because of its refineries, it was a ancient seafaring town since the time oil was discovered at Spindletop in 1900, or 1901. And because of that, I would always watch the ships going by and wonder about them. In 1978, I actually became a U.S. merchant mariner, sailing out of Cameron, Louisiana on what are called work boats. They're utility boats that service the drilling rigs off the coast of Louisiana and Texas. The second summer, I sailed on a tanker between Texas and Florida, bringing bunker fuel to the power plants in Tampa and Jacksonville, Florida. And then beginning back again in 1990, once I was ordained to the priesthood, I started using my vacation to go back to sea again and sail first as an ordinary seaman and then as an able-bodied seafarer. So I continue to keep my document up. And then next Thursday, I joined the training ship Kennedy in Galveston. And for the month of July, I'll be sailing with the Texas A&M Maritime Academy cadets for the month of July at that point, sailing as an AB, but also doing mass on board the ship on Sundays for the Catholic crew members there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you with us today. Our second panelist you'll hear from today is Shui Ng. He is a former seafarer and the ITF, the International Transport Workers Federation, ship inspector for the Texas Gulf Coast. Shui, could you share a few words with our attendees about yourself and your connection to the maritime world?
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Shui Ong. I am from Burma originally, and I live in Houston, Texas now. I'm working for the Seafarer International Union in US, and also working for the ITF, International Transport Worker Federation, as an ITF inspector. My job is to make sure all the foreign ship and the crew coming to my port, the whole Texas and Gulf, make sure their well-being for like their wages, the provision, food, injury, repatriation, everything. I have the crew call me for their help. I have to contact the owner and represent the crew member, foreign seafarer in Houston, Texas. And also I was a seafarer before. I've been through a lot like the seafarer facing now, without wages, no food, all kind of problems. So I left my job for helping seafarer every single day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you also for being here with us today. We really look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you.
Our final panelist today is Christine Commerce. She is the coordinator of the Diocese of Orlando Human Trafficking Task Force and a member of the Coalition of Catholic Organizations Against Human Trafficking, who've been running a campaign for the last few months about solidarity with seafarers. Christine, would you like to share a few words about yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me today. I'm actually originally from Trinidad and Tobago, since we're sharing where we're from. And our mission as part of the task force is to educate, engage, and empower the community to advocate for an end to human trafficking. And as a ministry of Catholic Charities, we also help provide support to survivors. So as Jennifer had mentioned, we are a member of COAT, and we collaborate with various agencies so we can magnify our efforts to address this affront to human dignity. With Cape Canaveral being in Brevard County and part of our diocese, we have a vested interest in ensuring that all seafarers' rights are met and that justice is served.
Thank you so much, Christine, for being with us today and representing the coalition on this call. Great, so let's go ahead and jump into some of the questions that we have for our wonderful panelists today. I'd like to begin with Father Sinclair and invite you to share a little bit more about, who are these seafarers that you minister to and come into contact with daily, and what intersection is there, with what they do with our own lives?
Well, it's first to understand seafarers are highly trained men and women who carry out a fundamental and essential role within our lives. A personal critique I can make of seafarers' ministry is that sometimes we treat them as if they are not fully mature, so that when they come out, they could. Rather, we have to start with the fact that these men and women are highly trained people in transportation. They take a $100 million to $150 million vessel and sail it from China through the Panama Canal to the Gulf of Mexico, to the Port of Houston or the Port of Port Arthur or New Orleans or wherever, and they find it the very first time. They don't like sort of bounce. It's like, well, we see lights here. Let's check. Oh, it's Corpus Christi. We just keep going north until they find Houston. They find it the first time. And it's an expression of that. And because of that highly trained nature, the work that they do keeps our industries and our lives together. Right now, if you were to try to buy a car, you would be challenged for that. And the question is, why? Are our brothers and sisters at the United Auto Workers not working? In fact, they are. But we have 50 ships that are stacked up at Long Beach, Los Angeles, Long Beach, container ships that are slowed down and they're discharging, and there are auto parts on those ships that need to go to Detroit or to Flint or to other places in our country in order to build the vehicles, and so the vehicles can't come in, or they are coming from Japan or Korea and they're sitting in ro-ro vessels and they can't come in. So the first thing I would say is it's important that we understand that these people are, they're officers, they're graduates of university and hold at least a bachelor's degree as well as their license. If they are rating, they have been trained as a rating in the different areas of the operation of the ships. And what they are doing is sailing highly sophisticated and very expensive vessels to get here to supply us with the things that we take for granted in our life. Your Dell laptop, your Apple phone did not fly here. It came on a container. And your card was not flown here. It came on a roll-on, roll-off vessel if it was an import from Europe or from Asia. So it's important to recognize that these seafarers provide us with the very fundamental things of our life. And if they did not do their work, then we would not do it. If the seafarers weren't loading fuel in Western Gulf, in Port Arthur and Lake Charles, and bringing it around to Fort Lauderdale, there would be nobody driving to Disney World. End of story. Because there would be no gasoline in Florida at that point. So that's how essential the work that these seafarers do.
Thank you so much. You know, I think I'm certainly guilty of not always thinking about how did these products arrive on the shelves that I rely on, you know, day to day and these products. So I really appreciate you helping us to understand that connection. I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit. I know you talked sort of about this backlog of ships in some of the ports. What are some of the ways over the last year and a half that you've seen the pandemic impact the livelihoods and the work of the seafarers?
Well, to address that specific issue is why are these ships backing up? Is that there was a large number of international longshoremen and warehouse union workers in Long Beach, Los Angeles, who got COVID. And so, you know, like in so many of industries, it's just-in-time production, just-in-time delivery, and just enough people to make this happen. Well, all of a sudden you get 100 longshoremen who get COVID, and you significantly reduce the number of skilled, say, for instance, container operators out there or checkers to keep track of these thousands and thousands of containers, and that slows the whole process down. Right now, at this moment, there's a major export port in China that has been significantly impacted by COVID, and they were down 70% in their exporting. They estimate this could take 3 or so weeks before they're able to catch up and move everything off the dock and get it there. So first off, the effect of COVID has had an effect of backlogging these vessels because the longshoremen who do that work to put it on the ship have been delayed in the process. But the COVID has also significantly impacted the lives of seafarers and has brought back an underlying prejudice against seafarers that persists for centuries. I live here in Port Arthur, and as a merchant mariner, you know, it's always like, oh, those drunks are coming off the ship now. Well, the fact is that we never bring our own drugs and alcohol with us when we come to a port. The community, no matter how Catholic or Christian it is, it could be Venice or Port Arthur, but they will supply us with all the things that we can that we should not be having in our life. And so the idea that, oh, we have to worry about these seafarers because they're going to bring disease to us is not true, especially in regards to COVID, because we've seen draconian policies towards seafarers who have just spent 38 days sailing from Port Arthur to Korea, but we have to worry about the seafarer bringing COVID to our shores. No, it is the pilot, it is the agent, it is the longshoreman, it is the line handler who comes on board the ship from the land who will expose the seafarers to that situation. And so in that light, we have seen terrible situations of discrimination in which, playing on these ancient prejudices of, oh my God, the seafarers are in town, plays upon that. And so we've seen a big challenge in getting seafarers repatriated. First, because of the collapse of the airline industry, just there were no planes to fly anybody home. But then even in home port countries, and the Philippines was a real scandal at this. They've got like, I don't know, 1 million seafarers in their population. It is a major part of maintaining their economic viability. And yet when it came time to bringing their seafarers home, they basically did not have a process and were refusing to let seafarers come home of the fear that they would bring COVID into the island, which was already there in the island at that point. So we've seen this great discrimination that was there. We got up to over 400,000 seafarers who were well over their contract, sometimes 15 months to 20 months.
Wow.
That number has been rolled down to about 200,000 now. it's pretty much working its way out in the process. But even there, when the seafarers were allowed to leave the ship and to go to the airport, they were dressed up in like TVAC suits, because standing in line to get on a plane, and there's a great picture from Asia in which these Filipino seafarers are standing there with masks on and TVAC safety equipment and gloves on, and right behind them is a businessman, an Asian businessman wearing a mask, talking on a cell phone in his suit. So we've seen this manifestation over and over again, and as I argue, from these ancient prejudices against seafarers, that we've got to protect ourselves from the seafarers, and instead of facilitating it so that those things that we need will get to us and we will respect those people who bring it to us, we instead put up all kinds of barriers that are there that have been a tremendous burden. And just as a last note, and if I have a college degree, then why am I going to stick with this work? Why don't I just go home? So we're not going to have good mariners sailing these ships. We're going to have substandard mariners sailing these ships, and we are going to see more collisions and more groundings and more oil on the beach. And people are going to say, well, why has this happened? Because we have made this decision to treat these seafarers as they're incompetent and dangerous and a threat to our society.
Thank you. I'm wondering, given all of these challenges, particularly within the last year and a half, if you can share a little bit about your particular ministry as a port chaplain, and in general, just what has been the response of the Catholic Church and other port chaplains to minister to these needs, as they've shifted and changed over the last year or so.
But, it's, to be quite frank and honest with you, we are often put on a back bench within Catholic ministries for refugees and immigrants. And it personally, it's a frustration, and I'm not going to bring all that to the table. But back in 2001 to about 2003, I visited Migrants and Refugee Services, because the federal government was taking away crewless visas in light of the attack of September 11th, and it was like, well, we don't know what to do about that. So sometimes I think one is that we, of marginalized ministries, people on the move to begin with, immigrants, refugees, the whole thing, we're even marginalized within that group. And so there's a sort of frustration there. The enthusiasm, the resources, the naming of port chaplains are not often there. For myself, I'll just speak for myself. I mean, I'm the pastor of a parish. I'm the head of the permanent diaconate formation program, and I'm the diocesan director for the Apostolate of the Sea. Well, the parish is going to suck everything out of me that it possibly can. And then I do have the deacon thing. So being able to be that active Catholic priest visiting the ships, being present there, those reasons, there's just only 24 hours in the day.
Right.
And so that becomes a real challenge that's there. But what we've seen is that those active ports that have active lay ecclesial ministers or co-workers, deacons or laity or priests that have been engaged in this, we also see them very engaged right now in getting vaccinations to the seafarers. In those places where they're engaged, that is happening, and that is a very, very positive thing. And we're getting great cooperation from the local community in being able to move this like excess of vaccine that we have now and bringing it to people who very much need that so that they can actually return back home with it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'd like to turn now to Mr. Ong and hear a little bit of some of the firsthand experiences of seafarers. Mr. Ong, I'm wondering if you could start by sharing with our attendees a little bit about the sort of day-to-day reality of seafarers. What are some of the challenges or risks that they face in this line of work?
Yeah, being a seafarer is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Even one misstep can cause injury or the case of death. Not to mention the seafarer are among the most exploited and abused group of the worker in the world. Facing abuse and corruption and on a large scale. Even going as far as heaven, they have to pay the agent fee to get the job, like in third world country. It's gonna cost like 2 or 3 months wages to get a job. So, and many seafarers has been criminalized, abandoned, and not paid their shipping by their wages by shipping owner, especially in the tough financial time. Most of right now, I have a lot of cases in China and other country. The owner abandoned a lot of ship, and the seafarer are they don't have food, they have no wages, something like that. And also even though the ship go everywhere, mostly they go to the pirate area, and if they have to afraid of the pirate also, captured by the pirate. If the owner don't pay the ransom, they are on their own. And plus, now like the pandemic and the 18 month of COVID pandemic, they are facing mental health issue also. For they cannot go home, not being repatriated due to the COVID, and plus they have to work, forced to work long hour without compensation or extra overtime. So for the mental health, they've been on the ship and they are missing the families. Some Indian ship, their family member are dying by the COVID. They can do nothing on the ship. They cannot go home, and that is the danger and the seafarer facing today.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's such an important reality for us to be aware of. And I'm wondering if you could share, recognizing the essential role that these seafarers play in shipping goods all over the world that are needed for day-to-day life. What is it that you would want consumers to know about, this work of seafarers, or, the risks that you just mentioned that they're facing in order to bring these products to our shores?
Yeah, for like seafarer and the ship, they go all over the world. Whatever the charter or ship owner want to bring the good to the country. And also like you are talking about the US customer.
Yeah, for people here in the United States, what is it that they should know about this reality of the seafarers who are coming to our ports, into our borders every single day, bringing these goods and services?
Yeah, for the exploitation of the seafarer doesn't adversely impact the US customer. Because if you ask the average customer in the US about the international shipping industry, and they will have no clue about the exploitation of the seafarer who through bring the good to the US, because most of them they don't know, because there is a serious lack of education about the injustice seafarer facing on the global scale. Unfortunately, the exploitation seafarer face does not result in cheaper good for the consumer. It's only result in more profit for the shipping company exploiting them. So the seafarer country.
Christine. Let's go to Christine Commerce now. Hello, it's so good to have you with us, Christine. As you remember, she's the coordinator of the Anti-Trafficking Task Force for Orlando, and she's also a very active member of the Coalition of Catholic Organizations Against Human Trafficking. So, Christine, could you please start by telling us about the current coalition's Solidarity with Seafarers campaign, please?
Sure. So COAT and Stella Maris is committed to raising awareness about this issue with the seafarers, what has taken place with their plight during the pandemic. And they're instrumental in advocating for policies and assistance that will help prevent labor trafficking and labor exploitation of this vulnerable population. So this campaign started on May 22nd and will continue through the end of the year. And it's geared towards reminding people about seafarers, who they are, why they're crucial to our supply chain. And so we're calling for businesses, government, and people in general just to recognize that seafarers are essential workers so that they may receive the COVID vaccine and that they also can return to their families so new workers can come aboard to the vessels to provide so many of our products that we rely on. So we really want to stand up for labor rights and human rights for these seafarers so they can have fair wages and safe working conditions. And I know Shui can account to that personally, where he, was aboard a ship and he wasn't getting fair wages on aboard the ship and was fighting for the rights of the seafarers, and he was threatened with his own life. I'm sure he could talk about it more better than I could, but that's basically what they're facing in a lot of ways that we don't realize. And so it's so important that we recognize the importance in the shipping industry.
Wonderful, thank you. And, I know you're going to be mentioning soon this online petition that we're going to be asking everyone to sign. And it has to do specifically with the declaration called the Neptune Declaration. And just so everybody's aware, before they sign our petition, can you explain just a little bit about what the Neptune Declaration is?
Sure. So the Neptune Declaration, more than 800 companies have already signed this, which advocates for seafarer well-being and crew change. So it also works toward every seaman who will have access to the vaccine. So we're asking people to sign this petition, specifically for Walmart to get on board with the Neptune Declaration, so that they will designate seafarers as essential workers, since they've already demonstrated a proactive interest in addressing forced labor in their supply chain. So we're only 340 signatures away from our 1,000 signature goal. So if everyone on this webinar today, took that time and effort to sign the petition, we'd be that much closer to making sure our seafarers get the justice that they need, and that we can get the supplies that they work so hard to bring to us.
Thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate it. So I think Jennifer's joined us again. That's wonderful, Jennifer. Jennifer, do you want to come on so we can start the panel of discussions that the questions that we're asking to every single one of our panelists?
Yes, thank you so much, Lisa, for stepping in. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna welcome back now Father Sinclair and Shui. And if each of you could just go around and sort of say, what is something that any individual who's listening to this webinar, who's participating today, could do to support seafarers? And maybe let's go ahead and start with Shui. What's something that people listening or participating could do to support seafarers?
So for me, I would like to say, once I'm the professional of being a seafarer, has been swayed by the exploitation they now face on the global scale. I would like to think June 21st, the Day of Seafarer, would be a joyless occasion. But instead this year, it will be more of a reminder that still seafarers stay underfed, underpaid, and just outright mistreated. It's like Father Sinclair mentioned, like 90% of the cargo travel by the water, and this is directly on the seafarer back. The seafarer who can no longer go ashore or even be repatriated due to COVID-19 or just pure neglect from their shipping owner or shipping company. And also, like, for right now is that the technology is changing in the modern day. Is for the ship coming to the port is loading and discharging is very fast. There's no time to go through also, but sometimes they cannot allow to go through by the authority in country what they are in, like the US. If they don't have the visa, they cannot go through. Even though you have the visa, they have if you are the first camera and you that the young seafarer, they cannot go through either. So as I mentioned before, the seafarer, they are the first one to suffer from the economic recession or the pandemic, plus suffering from like the some bad ship owner, like no wages, no provision, and some that is like abandoned by their ship owner. Most of the, I think last year and this year, we seen a lot of the seafarer on the ship is over a year. 18 months, 22 months. You know, they are the very hard working individual, you know, who they try to best to support their family, just like any other man and woman in regular walk of life. And unfortunately, the seafarers are the most exploited worker in the world, even though they are the unsung hero of the global economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is the reality of the seafarer, but most people do not have the clue of the injustice they're facing. So I just want to ask or leave you with the one question to think about.
Great.
All the seafarers around the world stop working just for a week or two. Will we then know how important they are now? And for me is, please help the seafarer whatever you can, like petition or writing the immigration or the other whatever they needed, like Siemens and they are doing, like Father Sinclair. So you can do a lot to help in the seafarer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And what a powerful question to leave us to reflect on. You know, what would happen to the world if even for just 1 week, all of the seafarers stopped working? Absolutely. Yeah, Christine, your thoughts on, you know, what can individuals do to stand in solidarity and support seafarers?
Sure. So the first thing I would say is that they would sign the petition for Walmart to support the Neptune Declaration, to prioritize seafarers' well-being. And second, we can pray for seafarers. And then third, I would say share this information on your social media to help spread the word. And finally, you can also donate to Stella Maris and Apostolate of the Sea, and they're collecting donations, non-perishables for port chaplains to give to the seafarers. These include slippers and toiletries and more. In addition to that, COAT's going to be sending out a really great resource called Solidarity with Seafarers, and this is a toolkit that individuals can use. There's going to be a link that will be sent in the follow-up email, so make sure you take a look at that and click on that, because it has prayer intentions, social media samples, how to donate, and more. I know here in the Diocese of Orlando, we've done a prayer service here at Catholic Charities in Central Florida. We've also done some social media awareness. And so those are just some of the ways that churches and parishes can play a role as well. And I think as individuals, sometimes we find ourselves becoming complacent when we hear about some of these issues. They seem so distant, so far away, and we don't always seem, you know, how does this affect us? How does this affect us directly? And as Father had mentioned, we're already seeing the effects of this. I know I'm trying to buy a car and they're telling me, no, we're not negotiating the price because we have 2 of these cars on the lot and we can't get the parts to make any more cars. And I know Starbucks has even announced, like, you may go to the counter and order your favorite latte and you may not be able to get it. So we are seeing some of the repercussions of this. And I know many of you may remember back when the pandemic had hit and we tried to get toilet paper and the shelves were empty and fights were breaking out in the grocery stores. It was crazy. So we don't want to see that happen again. So I would say that it is our duty and responsibility to stand in solidarity with these seafarers and our brothers and sisters in Christ, and speak on behalf of the voiceless and those who are more vulnerable. And I just want to share a quote real quick of Benjamin Franklin, because he once said that justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are.
Mm. Thank you so much, Christine. That really gives us a lot of ideas. You know, there's definitely something everyone can do and find a way to get connected to this work. Father Sinclair, I want to expand a little bit on the question for you, in addition to sort of what can people do in solidarity with seafarers. I know, given some of the challenges of, you know, how under-resourced the port chaplains are, and, you know, always looking for more help there. I wonder if you could also share, you know, what can people do certainly for seafarers, but what also could individuals do to support our local port chaplains and get involved more there?
Yeah, first off, this will probably sound a bit strange after the conversation that we've been having for a while, but growing up here in Port Arthur, we were sensitive to seafarers because literally the man living next door was a merchant mariner who was on a ship for 4 to 8 months at a time, and he would come home, or a child in our Catholic school class whose father was a mariner was on a ship during that time. And so there was an affinity because these were people that we knew. And so the first thing I would say is that even within the United States Merchant Marine, which does have some international ships, but most of these ships are, as Shui has said, coming from developing third world countries because of being able to exploit labor. However, the twist there, if they are working for a good shipping company under the international flag, that is a very, very, very desirable job because of the wages that they make in comparison to what they can make at home. That one of the things that we can do, even within the U.S. Merchant Marine or in the United States, is to reflect upon and become merchant mariners, whether it's on our inland waterways or our near coastal stuff, or on the deep sea side doing the Jones Act work, which is basically U.S. flag ships with U.S. crews sailing from U.S. port to U.S. port, or the international activity that takes place. But once we actually become mariners, then we become attuned to that. And we saw that very clearly when the Maersk Alabama was captured by Somali pirates. The Somali pirate situation had been going on well over for a year or two at that point. But oh my goodness, look, the pirates are attacking ships off Somalia because it was our ship that got impacted. When a U.S. crew on a workboat working off of Nigeria, when the captain was kidnapped, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's kidnapping taking place off of Nigeria, because it was somebody that was an American at that point that was being impacted. But that story had actually been going on for quite a while at that point. So, you know, one of the things is we need smart, quality, first class men and women in order to become merchant mariners in our U.S. Merchant Marine that pay a well above family wage job to do that work. And if we also have more people in that area, then people will be more tied to that industry and more attuned to the realities that are there. As U.S. merchant mariners, we aren't being impacted with abandoned ships. So, though in fact we actually had abandoned ships in 2020 when a company went bankrupt and stopped paying its crew for about 2 months. So we do see that, but that's a very, very, very rare situation. But if we have friends who are merchant mariners, then we are attuned to what's going on in the merchant marine. And then these stories that do appear in the paper flag us at that point, and we become more connected to that. I see in one of the chat comments there that one of our participants lives in a port and was unaware of the maritime ministry that's there. And we do face a major problem in the maritime ministry. It's on the waterfront now under the Maritime Transportation Security Act in a secure area that the public can't get to. Then it's hard to really connect to it because it's on the margins. When Pope Francis talks about on the margins, well, literally the port is on the margin of the community. And it's also closed off because of the Maritime Transportation Security Act and those things there. So it becomes very challenging. So those areas where I have seen successful maritime ministry, and I'm thinking about Father Rivers Batu in Houston, Texas right now. He passed away about 5-6 years ago. But it was having leaders with a great deal of personality who are active within the larger community, who tell people the story about what they're doing, not so much about exploitation, but around these men and women who are coming to visit our community, that then brings about a response to help out. So if the person is a Catholic priest like myself, who celebrates on his Sunday Mass at his parish on the second Sunday of July, which is Sea Sunday, then that parish community, they may not be experts, but they're going to be like, oh yeah, the pastor did something about this, about the sea thing, but it plants that seed to begin to think about it. So it's very much dependent upon the enthusiasm and the interaction of those who are involved in maritime ministry to talk about it and bring folks to connect into that.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm going to shift now to some of the questions that have come in from our attendees. And so if others who are watching and listening have a question for our panelists, please enter those in the Q&A box. That helps keep them separate from the chat box so we can see the questions. But the first question that came in, if any of you are aware, asks about, are there international laws that protect seafarers? And if not, are there any that are being proposed or considered? So I wonder maybe if either Shui or Father Sinclair, if you're aware of what are the international laws to try and protect seafarers?
Yeah, I'll kick off and then give it to Shui, but there are international conventions, and one of the most important, and one of the United States has not signed, and that is the Maritime Labor Convention of 2006. Because we're not a signatory of the MLC 2006, when we see wage issues and abandonment issues here in the United States, those things that are covered within the convention are not enforceable here in the United States. And so they slip through the cracks. Now, there's some hope that this convention that has been with us probably since about 2010 may be able to finally get ratified here in the U.S. Senate, and hopefully that will take place. That is something that people like the different advocacy groups within the USCCB and within dioceses can certainly get behind once that legislation gets on the Senate floor. But the challenge is, and we see this over and over again, that the regulation of the seas is determined by the coastal states. They control the rules. And so no matter what the rule is, they will do something because they want to do something. No better story than that of the tanker Prestige that in about, it was 2010, 2007, this was supposed to be handled. What often finds is that the seafarer becomes the scapegoat when you can't get the person who is really in charge, who's hiding in an apartment in Piraeus, Greece, or Hong Kong, or London. You can't get them, so you will capture the captain and make him the scapegoat for all the things that are there. And we've seen over and over again where MLC or other rules that have been determined by the International Labor Organization and the National Maritime Organization that lays out processes. But when it comes to it, we in fact would prefer to have to arrest the captain. And we see that going on right this moment in Sri Lanka, because the United Arab Emirates and the Indian government and the Indian ports would not take off leaking acid-filled containers off this ship. that they eventually got off Sri Lanka and the ship caught fire and the entire ship burned and is now floundered sitting on the bottom. And so the response is not to go to the port of India, to that captain, to the head of the port who would refuse to lift those containers off the vessel, but rather they arrested the captain.
Wow.
Troy, you want to add something?
Yeah, like we have the international law for the Seafarer, Maritime Labor Convention 2006. But what should I say? They set up the rule and who is responsibility, who gonna take the charge, everything in the law, but it's depend on the ship owner and the flag state. Because most of the ship owner are like Father Singler that they are hiding. You can find the real ship owner. There's only like they change like the operator of the ship because of the under FOC system, like flat or convenient. It's like, for example, because I'm the ship owner from US, but I want to hire the cheap labor and not paying tax to the government, and I can do whatever I want to the crew because so I pay money to get registered from the Panama or Liberia or even the Tibet. So they don't have to worry about the crew. Criminalize the seafarer. And plus, we have the law like MSC 2006, but depend on the country and the flag state. It's like the Canada, they are really enforcing the Australia, they enforcing the MSC 2006. This is very good, but some country, they don't care. They just sign they just signed the MSC 2000, ratify the MSC 2006, but they're not really doing good for the seafarer and according to the law. And also like some flag state, like Panama, Liberia, Marshall Island. Now they doing something now because of we have to push them and make them do according to the MSC 2006. But we have a lot of flag like Mongolia, they don't even have the sea, but they show the flag for Mongolia is very cheap. Other small country like Vanuatu, so this country, they don't care and they don't follow according to the international law.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems like there are laws in place, but it's very difficult, from what you both shared, to enforce them or to hold the right party responsible for these injustices against the seafarers. There was a question that came through to help clarify sort of the connection with labor trafficking and how, especially during the past year and a half with contracts getting overextended and people working without contracts, how have you seen some of these intersections, where seafarers end up in a situation of labor trafficking, where they're being exploited, they're not being paid, they're forced to continue the work without another option for maybe being repatriated home or ending their contract when it's supposed to?
Yeah, I would pick up on that. There's clear rules within the Maritime Labor Convention of 2006, which labor supplying countries like the Philippines have endorsed, but yet the problem of having to pay manning agents to get the job and basically go into a debt bondage situation of having to pay back these costs again, which often run into the thousands of dollars that just like in a coyote immigrant situation where you have to sort of draw funds from a large part of the family in order to come across the border, in order to possibly get the job on the other side of the border, to then remit back to the family the resources that then have to pay off the debt that you've accrued. It's the same thing that you have situation there. So you'll find situations where, as a U.S. merchant mariner, if this is a really poor quality company, poor quality ship, I'll sign off and go get another one. But I'm not in debt bondage, unofficial debt bondage. I can do that. And even if they don't pay me my full wages when I quit, it's like, okay, fine. But these folks, because of the debt bondage that is there, that they are tied to that vessel much longer than they necessarily need to be in the process. I mean, this is not as bad as what we see in the Pacific fishing fleets, but nonetheless, it certainly is there, and it can hold it there. And because it costs you so much to get that job, to quit and then go back and get another job becomes really, really problematic until you take care of paying off the old debt so that you can then accrue the new debt again.
And also I want to add it like blacklisting.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't, like for a second, to pay the fee for the agent fee for the job, plus they have the like Philippines and other country. If you complain about your welfare and your wages or provision or repatriation to like ITF or the union, they're gonna blacklist you. Not only this agent, they have the connection, the email link or whatever the blacklist thing, they put it, his name and all the document in the website. So most of the agent know they're not gonna get hired again for the job.
And I'll say this, that there's blacklisting, but Shui has taken blacklisting to a higher level, because he was so blacklisted in Burma that if he went back to Burma, they were going to bury him in a prison someplace, because they were so upset with him because of his labor work that was there. So when Shui talks about blacklisting, it's not a hypothetical that he encounters when he does his ship inspections, but rather he himself, the Burmese government refused to reissue his passport except with a visa that would only allow him to go back to Burma, so that he could go back to Burma under the military, to be arrested and buried in prison. And some of his compatriots in that situation actually were killed in the process. So yeah, Burma, Shui certainly is an expert on that subject, right, Shui?
Most of the crew, they are fear of the economic fear, like losing the job, and not to hire again from the company and the agent. And most of the case here, like they call me, Shui, we don't get the wages. So the wages don't mention my name. He sent me the email or call me. They don't want their name to be listed or mentioned to the company or the captain. So for me, it is okay. I can go and inspect my own. I can find a way how they cheat the crew. But sometimes like they want to go home and not to mention their name, but I have to tell them. If I talk to the captain or the company, I'm gonna look like some crazy, Oh, you have to send some guy from the ship to go home. I have to know their name. I told the crew, you have to stand up for yourself. You cannot stand up for yourself. Nobody gonna stand up for you. And they start mentioning, blacklisting. They're gonna blacklist me. So I told them, they can blacklist you 1 or 2 or 3. Because everybody say we are blacklisted. What are they gonna do? The owner, they need the crew. The agent, they want the crew to make money. So the only problem is because of the economic fear for the not to support their family. This is the only reason for the blacklist, and they stay fear.
Yeah, thank you. When we talk about human trafficking, sort of three of the key words are force, fraud, and coercion. And certainly all of the examples that you just gave us, talk about sort of that threat, whether it's physical violence or the blacklisting, the repercussions against the person, the fraud sometimes that happens with the promise of what the job will be like or how much they'll really make. And then once they get on the ship, the conditions being so different. So thank you for helping to enlighten us on that. We're pretty much at time, so I'm sorry we won't get to everyone's question, but we didn't really talk much about the demographics of seafarers, and there was a question that came in about our women seafarers. So I wanted to, maybe have you share just really briefly about who are the types of people who are these seafarers?
Yeah, I would say we are seeing more and more seafarers, but the women seafarers are tending to be in the officer ranks. And one of the things, we used to joke about Swedish steam power, and that basically means, physically hauling a heavy object across the deck. And you can imagine some, 6'7" Swedish Viking type of guy. But a lot of the work, especially when it comes to officers, is more intellectual stuff and less physical stuff, at least on the deck side. In the engine room, we also see women officers moving into that category also. So especially in the first world countries, you find in the United States, Texas Maritime Academy probably has about 20 to 25% of the cadets training for officers in the engine and the deck department are women. That's replicated at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, but that's also replicated on European campuses also. We've just seen recently, I think an Indian woman has become a master within the Indian fleet in the last couple of years. So there's progression that is there, but at the same time, you talk to the average high school young woman and say, hey, do you want to get on a ship and bounce around in heavy weather and travel to far places and to, be greasy, dirty, and be covered with rust chips? And she's like, well, I don't want to do that. And so there's been but I will say that there has been a tremendous amount of effort beginning from the International Maritime Organization to actually encourage women into the maritime industry. But I think there's just some the nature of the job itself that a lot of young women will look at it and say, oh, that maybe look fun, but no thanks. I'll become an airline pilot instead.
Great, thank you. To end, I'd like to have us just do one more go around and say, there's so much information that we covered on our webinar today. What is one thing that you want people to make sure that they remember and take away with them from this webinar? So let's start with Christine. One takeaway you want to make sure people remember.
So I would say look for that Solidarity with Seafarers campaign toolkit, and then just take a minute to take one action, at least one action out of your busy schedules, because it may cost us a little time, but think about the price that our seafarers are paying for our well-being. So I think that's really important to just take a look at, keep an eye out for that toolkit and take an action out of that. And if I could just leave one more quote real quick, because I love my quotes. It was by William Wilberforce, who once said that you may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know.
Great quote to end on. Thanks, Christine. Father Sinclair, one takeaway you want to make sure our participants remember.
Well, I certainly want to just stress the recruitment. We need smart, active, engaged young men and women to enter into our merchant marine, to continue to allow our goods in the coastal and inland and foreign work to go. And we need those. We're getting to be an older and older group of people. And so we're looking for the best and to do that. And it's great work. And it's significant and essential element of the well-being of our society to have men and women step forward in order to do this work in our community.
Thank you so much. And Shui, one takeaway you want our participants to remember from today?
Yes, for me, they should be treated like human beings and dignity and respect. and just spread the word about how important seafarers are doing for our daily life.
Mm.
Support for the seafarer wherever you can, and yeah, anything you can help to do it, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you again to all of our wonderful panelists today. We learned so much, and I hope everyone is inspired to take at least one action leaving this webinar today. So thank you for your time. As was mentioned, we are going to be sending out a follow-up email to all of our participants and registrants for the webinar that will have additional resources, including the toolkit that Christine mentioned, a link to the petition, and additional information about Stella Maris and the Apostleship of the Sea USA in order to get more involved and get connected. So thank you for being with us today, and enjoy the rest of the day of the Seafarer.